Okay, fantastic. So just a tiny bit of housekeeping. It's obviously a 15-minute talk with 5 minutes of questions. I've got some signs, so keep an eye out for the signs. Hopefully you can get me fixed on a screen so you can see them. So I'll give you a 2-minute sign and then a time's up sign. Other than that, we're pretty much ready to go. So I'll pass over to you, David, and the title of your talk is Performing Under Pressure.
Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity. So yeah, I'm David Charlton. I'm an applied sports psychologist who supports athletes from, I suppose, well, kids from as young as 8 years old up to the professional footballer or rugby player. In today's talk, I'll be referring back to Peter Clough's 4 C's model of mental toughness in relation to naturally performing under pressure and coping with pressure in different ways. So yeah, on your screen there, you can see 4 different images there. And yeah, I'm wondering, who do you think actually has the most pressure to deal with? I'll just give you a little second or two to think about that. Now, you know, if we look at it, we've got the refuse collector, and if we think about the story behind the refuse collector, you know, they could be a single parent. They may have 2 talented children, one, well, both in academies where they're playing taxi driver, and then they find it really, really difficult when it comes down to being a parent, managing their job, and their overall life there. So there could be an awful lot of pressure. Mikel Arteta in the top right-hand corner, obviously there's a lot of pressure on him at the moment when it comes to his role as a manager. But again, you know, we don't know what's going on in the background in his personal life, for argument's sake, which could mean that there are more and more internal pressures. Then we have the bottom left-hand corner, the gymnast who's maybe trying to do some backward somersaults on the beam, which is a very difficult task to actually do. But then if we think about the background there, maybe that gymnast's returning from injury, potentially they've had some sort of trauma in their lives, or they've just had some past falls recently, or maybe, and I've seen it before, they might have had a coach who is over enthusiastic and arguably is a bit too disciplined with them, and it can be very stressful for the gymnast. And then we've got the surgeon there. Naturally, the surgeon's role is very pressurized and stressful. It could be a life or death situation that they're dealing with. And also, if you actually factor in for the surgeon, maybe the culture of the hospital that they're working in, maybe it could be a toxic environment. There might be some sort of bullying culture there. We just don't know. So yeah, the key message is there may be 4 people and performing 4 different roles, but there's a lot that actually can impact how we deal with pressure. Now, there's a quote here: we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. What I'm referring to here is expectations, and how our expectation levels can really shape our perception. I'll give you an example of something I come across on a regular basis, because I tend to work in football settings an awful lot. I'm guessing for those who follow football, you're aware of who Harry Kane is. So I'll ask you this question, and you could actually use the chat box if you wish for this. If we think about Harry Kane, if Harry Kane had 10 shots, how many times do you expect him to score? Just simply pop in the chat box from the 10 shots. So maybe we've got a Tottenham supporter here who's come up with 10 7s, 2s, and 4s. Now, if 10 out of 10, another Tottenham fan. If I'm working with a client who is a striker, I'm likely to ask that question just to understand their expectation levels. And often what I notice, and it doesn't really have to be the youngster, it could actually be the professional footballer, and they might actually quote you 6, 7, 8 out of 10. And actually, if you look at the reality behind Harry Kane, he scores 18%, so 2 out of 10. So he actually misses 8 out of 10 times. And if you look at some of the other strikers, Mo Salah's, the Erling Haaland, their statistics are very similar. And often, because of with expectations being out of sync, often what can happen is the client then drops their head, they go hiding in spaces, they don't ask for the ball and just do the simple things that I suppose a footballer, a centre forward or a forward player would do. So part of, I certainly see my role as part of actually trying to educate them about whether their expectations are in sync or out of sync. And obviously this can have a big impact on how they deal with pressurized situations. Then moving on, if we think about our emotions as well in relation to expectations, often if we think about the young child, children, their brain doesn't actually develop fully until they're around about 30 years old. And as we all know, children are more susceptible to emotions going up and down like a roller coaster. So trying to educate someone and help them recognize when they do become sad, when they do become angry, scared, is an important factor and something to consider. And certainly from an adult perspective, what I notice when it comes down to one element of mental toughness, which is emotional control, you will find that people, if we think about the continuum 1 to 10, people will sit in different areas of their emotional control, yet they could still be overall mentally tough and be able to deal with pressure well. So you may find that an athlete is a 3 or 4 for emotional control, yet for confidence they're very high, for commitment they're very high, and for the way they see challenging situations is very high. So therefore they actually do go on to manage pressure okay. Whereas you also see some people who score highly for emotional control, and then are able to keep a poker face, if you like, when they're playing their sport. Yet they might have another area of mental toughness which is low, but their overall mental toughness is high. So it can be a bit of a counterbalance. Moving on. So the way I see it is very much all about self-awareness, and these are 4 steps essentially when working with clients in an applied setting that I certainly try to follow. I'll share the example of working with a coach, and this is going back a few years ago now, but the coach was a rugby coach. And if we think about the 4 C's in mental toughness, so firstly for commitment, really trying to help them understand themselves better, because they were a very highly committed person. You could argue they were working 24/7, really trying to help them come up with strategies in order to rest up was important, to come up with strategies in order to switch off was important, to help them recognize that the goals that they may well be setting were or weren't helpful was an important factor. We also looked at the time as well in terms of their confidence. So their confidence level was very high, and what actually came with that was that they would take on too much. And then if you combine that with another C, challenge, and they like to take risks, so they would take on different situations. They would love a challenge, essentially. So actually recognizing that they might make changes and say yes too much, and how that could actually have a detrimental impact on how they dealt with stress and pressure was an important part of the work. Also, as part of confidence, one of the smaller measures is interpersonal confidence, and if it is high, which it can be with a lot of coaches, again, you know, I suppose what happens then, they can potentially become more domineering and very persuasive. On the flip side of that, if it's lower, if they're then talking to the managerial staff above, they might struggle to actually say no to various different tasks that they're offered. Then if we consider the control element to it all, supposing the control element is high, which you would think could actually be very helpful for a coach. Certainly if they're in an emotional sport, I would agree, yes, it can be on the sidelines, maybe on a football pitch or on a rugby pitch in this case. However, because it's a lonely role, if they don't have the support system around them, often it can produce a bit of a bottleneck situation, which was the case in this way. So in order to help this particular person, yes, we help them with self-awareness, we educate them, then they have to practice what they preach by, in this case, looking at strategies to be able to switch off, to find out, to prioritize their workload, and then to become a better delegator. And then obviously they've got to apply that and then put those things into everyday life. So yeah, some considerations there when it comes to mental toughness and building self-awareness. I'll also touch on this and how an individual's core values are very, very important to consider as well when you're supporting people. If I was just to choose 3 core values here, which are quite common in sport, certainly with high achievers. We've got from the list on the right-hand side there: achievement, competitive, effective. No, I'll throw another one into the mix as well: discipline. What can often happen there is, if we're thinking about the athlete, they potentially can then lack some trust in themselves. I'll give you another example of a case study of a golfer, a really talented golfer who had these core values, but what it used to mean when it came down to big competitions was that they took themselves and the competition too seriously. They could actually learn from the marathon runner, who would actually, marathon runners kind of taper before an event. This person would actually practice more and more, which is really common in golf, in the build up to a big golf tournament, and they become very, very reactive. And basically, by the time they stand up on the first tee box, they're burnt out before they actually start. So again, if we think back to self-awareness and educating them, it's important to be able to help the athlete recognize their values, and then the good parts around that, and the negative blind spots, if you like, which cause them challenges. How am I doing for time?
You have about a minute, just under a minute left.
It's okay. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll finish it off on this final slide here. Basically, by improving one's self-awareness, whether it's a coach, whether it's an athlete, then it does minimize this actually happening. At least I hope it does. If I can press find the play there.
With no worries, simple streets. This is across from me, 5.5 years old. She's over the age of 12, Sarah's 17. And well ahead of the dog, well ahead of the dog. Sometimes that works. If you don't go behind you, you can lose control. Oops. Oh, it is a good run too. Well, the dog's got to do what a dog's got to do. What a show. Oh, dear.
Yes, as I say, self-awareness does help this not happening with your clients. And yeah, obviously for more of my work there and more on demystifying mental toughness, you can check out my podcast if you wish.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was a really interesting talk there. We've got a good crowd in here. Is there any questions from the floor? Any questions? So I've got a question. So I was just wondering, from your personal experience of working with these individuals, has it changed over time? So have the way that they presented to you in terms of how they manage pressure, has that changed over time, or is it quite consistent in how it looks and how you deal with it? Have dealt with it, apologies.
I would say in terms of the pressures themselves, they haven't really changed. I notice 3 big things in my work, and I tend to work an awful lot with individuals. Go with one would be perfectionism, where they're highly motivated, highly driven, and they become then very self-critical, and that perception of reality can change, essentially put themselves under too much pressure. Then the second thing would be, certainly with youngsters, this can apply an awful lot, is social approval, and where they're trying to mind read essentially what coaches, what scouts, what teammates, rivals are thinking. So pressure becomes an issue in that respect. And then the third one would be whereby the athlete's identity is wrapped around the sport, too much in effect, and it goes on to impact on their self-esteem and self-worth. And yeah, so those are the three biggest difficulties that I note. In terms of the solutions, over time they haven't really changed a great deal. I think as a practitioner personally, I read an awful lot, and I'm trained in mindfulness, and I really enjoy self-compassionate focused therapy as well, and find that a really, really helpful tool. And obviously, I suppose as a practitioner, it's keeping abreast of research, that is critical.
Excellent. Thank you very much, David. That was interesting to hear your thoughts there, and also with your talk more broadly. That brings this session to a close. What we have next is the athlete panel, which starts at 2 o'clock and is back in the main room. So I'd kindly ask you all to pop back to the main room. You've got 5 minutes as well, so have a little break, and then we will continue in there.
So thank you very much, whoever's just done that. I will pass over to Adam and Max. I don't know who was leading it. I've completely forgotten. I'll pass over to both of you, and I'll pass over to Charlotte. I will stop sharing, and I hope you enjoy.